That team was legends, for a long time.
Tonight's Chuck Smith Show, presented by Ulmer's Appliance Service, is also brought to you by our loyal sponsors. Charlie's Bar and Restaurant, located at 800 Shore Road in Summers Point. Meet your friends at Charlie's at the shore since '44. Chico & Son Sub Shop, located at 1620 Tilton Road, Northfield. Choose the #1 sub shop in South Jersey. And the Docks Place, located at 646 Bay Avenue in Summers Point. Book your dinner reservations now at 609-926-0404. Thank you for your support of Mainland Regional Football.
But when you have a solid program, a lot of that can take over what an individual might do. Before he releases the ball, he takes a shot right as he releases it here. And for him to stand in there in the face of that, and that's just the confidence that he has. And I found myself just trying to catch my breath for a bit because of the excitement and just the pressure of that moment. This is a game that the kids, you live for.
This is the Chuck Smith Show on Cape Atlantic Live, presented by Ulmer's Appliance Service. Now, here's Coach Smith and your host, Nick Kosko.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Chuck Smith Show right here on Cape Atlantic Live. I'm your host, Nick Kosko, and with me, as he is every week, is Mainland head coach Chuck Smith. Coach, good to talk to you here on this Tuesday night. A much better weekend for you guys, coming off a 42-7 win over Hammonton on the road ahead of your home opener this coming Friday against Millville. So we'll start with the game that just occurred a couple of days ago. Big one, big bounce-back win for you guys. Get to 1-1 on the season. So first of all, big props on the win, but I got to imagine that felt pretty good for you guys to kind of put it all together for the first time this season.
Yeah, Nick. It was it was a good bounce back game, like you said, for the kids. We didn't put our best foot forward in the first game of the season. Kids knew that, and I think they came out with something to prove that we really weren't as bad as that first game as it was, and they really came out and played excellent in all facets of the football game on Friday night.
Without a doubt, John Franchini threw 3 touchdowns. 2 of those were to Liam Kennedy. I think the star of the game, as I know there was plenty of press clippings for him, but Jake Blum had his, I would say, a return to form type of game. He scored on offense, touchdown reception, rushing touchdown, had a pick 6 as well. So, it seems like the seniors really stepped up in this one as well, where we mentioned how the previous week against Atlantic City, offense wasn't quite in sync, and the defense gave up too many big plays, but it all meshed together, especially in that second quarter where you guys scored 28 points going into the halftime locker room. What can you say about those individual performances and that kind of just obviously catapulted you guys to a pretty coasting type of second half? Yeah,
it was a great week of practice with the boys. You saw them, the seniors leadership step forward. A bunch of different guys on the team, like a Chase Hogue and a TJ McBall. Some guys are quieter, more lead by example, like a Jake Blum and so forth. And sometimes I think we forget, we assume when you have great players and they miss the whole preseason that you can just plug them in and they can play, and you forget they got to get in game shape too, I think that was the case with Lucas DiBiaso and Jake also. They looked more in rhythm this past week, because the week before was really their first week of live action. Since the previous season, having missed the whole summer. But they really came into form real quick, and it was a benefit to us.
So I was going to ask about Jake Blum, but you mentioned Lucas and other guys like that where they didn't have much preseason action. Did it really? Was it as simple as they needed one game under their belts to be like, all right, we're back into it. We want to get right back to it, and then we feel more comfortable? Was it as simple as that?
I guess to a degree. I mean, when we practice, we don't hit a lot in practice. We have thud mostly, and some live contact here and there. But, when you get on the field and you're playing in a game, there's a whole different level with the adrenaline and the game speed and so forth. You try to simulate it in practice as best as you can, but it doesn't naturally get to that level. And I think that had a lot to do with them being, kind of fatigued, mentally and physically in the first game. And, that one game under their belt, kind of like their first preseason game, really showed the benefit of that, having played against Hammonton this week.
When you look at the message you sent, and I think we talked about it last week, where it was like, that's not who we are, but we're, then we're going to use this opportunity to really bounce back. And it seemed like the kids were really eager last weekend watching the film, getting right back into the practice field that like, all right, we know what we are from the past couple of years. We know what this group is. I would imagine that message pretty much resonated every single day of practice. Even though you guys were on the road again, it was just like, all right, it was almost back to business, it seemed like.
Yeah. We kind of fell back into a rhythm that we're used to. Practice picked up a little bit with the intensity and so forth. And, when we got to Friday night of the game, the kids really came out of the gates fast, and, played almost a flawless first half.
Mm-hmm.
By halftime, the game was, running clock and whatnot. But it was a tribute to the boys. They really had something to prove, and they came out and did that.
Only a 7-0 lead after the first quarter. So you mentioned the flawless first half. Was there something that just, led to that scoring explosion in the second quarter? Because again, it was only 7-0, and all of a sudden it's 35-0 at halftime. You mentioned that running clock. What really clicked from quarter one to quarter two?
It was our special teams, plain simple. We were forced to punt. The one time we had a punt in the first half, Nick Kosko came in and punted the ball down. We downed it inside the 5, held them down there. All of a sudden, the whole first half, right from that point forward, we were playing on their side of the field the whole time. Led to a couple block punts in the game. Nick Kosko, every time we scored, I think he had five touchbacks. I think he had 5 or 6 touchbacks. He averaged 43 yards on the punts. He was 6 for 6 on his PATs, and he, we don't have the Cape Atlantic League anymore, but I know Tom Williams reached out to me at the end of the season, and Nate only needed 5 more kicking points to become the all-time leading kicking points leader in Cape Atlantic League history. So he got 6. So he became that the other night also. And we blocked a couple punts down deep. One was a touchdown for, so special teams units really played well the other night.
Yeah, I always like to reference special teams as that's a unit that can make or break 2 of those games on that schedule, especially in high school football. And Trent Resch was the one who scored that last touchdown in the fourth quarter off that block punt. So obviously a huge win for you guys, get back on track 1-1. It's almost like a new season pretty much every week at this point. So you guys have Millville this week, when of course we'll have that game right here on Cape Atlantic Live right at 6:00 for that kickoff, your home opener, of course, and we'll get into some of the other specialties that are going to go on, some of the pregame ceremonies for Friday night. But Millville, this has turned into pretty much a recent rivalry, I would say. Over the last 5 years, you guys have, I know you guys are only 1-4 against them over the last 5 meetings, I should say, since 2015, but there's been some close games, and obviously there's been a lot of playoff meetings and playoff-like atmospheres with Millville, considering you guys and their recent success at the state level. So just the initial thoughts about Millville this year. I know they brought a lot back. They lost some good talent, but it seems like, just like you guys, reloading every year.
Yeah, they're good. They're a better team than what the record indicates. They played. They played in the preseason. They played against Glassboro, state champion. And that was a battle there. And Glassboro came out on top of that. They opened up with RV in the Battle of the Beach at Rowan University, and they were behind a little bit there, but they never gave up in that game. I think they were losing like 30-something to nothing at one point, and they kind of came back, and that they never gave up.
Yeah.
And then of course against Atlantic City. And Atlantic City is the team that's showing it's really worth something to watch this year. But they're a dangerous team. They have a lot of speed, in the backfield and at the skill positions like they usually do, and they're very big up front. And they're Millville. They've been a powerhouse the last few years, year in, year out for probably the last 7 years or so, going back to when Dennis Thomas was the head coach and turned the whole program around right then and there. But we're not taking them lightly. Obviously, we're not looking at that record as being an 0-2 team. We know they're not really an 0-2 type of program there. And, we have to play just a tremendous game again on Friday night to have a chance to win this.
Coach Ayala, obviously, I talked to him earlier this summer. He raved about, some of the individuals that are back, because they had a lot of young guys last year that contributed a lot. And, of course, I think it starts at the quarterback position with Robbie O'Connor, only a junior this year, really polished high school quarterback. He's got skilled guys up the wazoo. You lose a guy like Lazier Brooks, who's over at Alabama right now representing South Jersey, but he still has other guys like Aiden Dawkins, Reggie Holly, and Jaden Days on that offense. So we'll start with Millville's offense, which has been very explosive over the last couple of years. When you look at what you have to defend, I know you really can't just defend one thing and hope to shut down the other thing. How do you manage your defense against an offense like this that can not only run the football with a two-headed monster, but a quarterback who's one of the more prolific throwers here in South Jersey?
Yeah, he had tremendous numbers last year as a sophomore. Did a nice job taking over for Zamat, who I thought was one of the best high school quarterbacks I've seen in a long time in this area. But their run game is really scary. Just watching film of them, the speed they have in the backfield, the running backs run very tough. They got big linemen to be road pavers up there for them also. But I really like, not that you're a fan of watching another team that you're getting ready to play, but I really like the way the running backs run, the speed they have, the cutting ability that they have, the burst that they have, and they're tough runners, and we have to do a great job of bottling up their running game and making tackles.
When you look at their defense too, because I know you kind of already alluded to with their offense, especially their offensive line, some of those guys are playing both ways, and they're historically big on the lines. Usually year to year. Jaden Jones, Sincere Gilmore, they jump off the page already through the first 2 games, and based on what they've already done with the program. When you go back now, when you're looking at their defense, do you stick to your same game plan of how you attacked in the past couple of years as well, and how you've been able to operate the offense this year? It's simply, hey, we need to stay on our blocking assignments, run the football, pass when we have to. Is that kind of the approach this on Friday as well?
Yeah, I mean, football's a simple game. It's blocking and tackling, and we didn't do either of them well the first game of the season. Last week we did a pretty good job of that. And when you're playing a quality opponent like a Millville coming in, you really have to turn it up a notch and do a great job in those aspects. And their defense is always very fast, very tough, very physical. Coach Core does a great job, their defensive coordinator over there with them. Do you look at previous year's film and just see how they defended you? Yeah, you do. You got to really study what they do this year because, teams change schemes, they change personnel, and they have to fit schemes to personnel and so forth. So you just hope you can find something that you might be able to exploit or, be able to do something you might find some rhythm with as you're going, and sometimes you go into a game plan with certain plays you think are going to work and they do something different. And next thing you know, you're trying to do something else. That's part of the strategy of the whole game. That's why it's so important with your coaching staff to have great people around you who can see things, because when you're down the field, you can't always see things from an offensive perspective that you're looking at, shades and things like that, movements, slants and stunts and all. But upstairs, you really have a bird's eye view of everything. And it's so important. I know that, when I was an offensive coordinator for a long time, I was upstairs all the time. And it was like, it was a lot easier to call the game from upstairs and being able to see that in that vantage point. And, I've been fortunate for a number of years to have quality people upstairs to really help me out and guide me with what we were trying to do with our game plan and being able to attack it.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you about film from previous years, especially the last couple of years where, you go, last year I know it was a tough meeting between the two of you. But, the previous 2 years before that were playoff meetings, sectional final and a state semifinal. So you kind of already answered the question how, you maybe look at that stuff because of certain tendencies, but are you guys really just focusing on, we have 2 games of film on them against really high quality opponents. We're going to stick to that and maybe not use last year's film at all?
I think we look at everything. We really do look at everything. We've had some battles with them over the years. Last year's game was a good game until we turned the ball over, in the third quarter, and then they returned it for a touchdown, and then the wheels kind of fell off the wagon for us. And they were too good of a team to have that happen. Make too many mistakes, because they're so explosive and scored so fast. Next thing you know, a 7-6 ball game winds up 40-something to 7. But it's different every year, and I can tell you, like all the years I've coached and been in so many games, you go in there with a set list of plays you think are going to be the plays, and next thing you know, the defense comes out and something totally different, You have to be able to adapt to it right away. And that's why, I think every offensive coordinator has, you have your list of plays and you put little check marks next to the ones that might be the hot plays for that week, but you're still practicing the other ones just in case, because you don't want to forget about them. And next thing you know, you need them in crucial situations.
Is it nice to have a team like this as your home opener? I know, again, I'm sure people are like, you know what, it's a tough game and it doesn't matter if it's home or away, but I think it feels, for you guys at least, it might feel a little bit better that, you've played this team pretty much on the road for, I believe the last 3 matches have all been on the road, whether it was a neutral site or it was at their place. I think is it kind of nice to say, all right, they're going to come to our place, and now we get to show off in front of the home crowd against a really high quality opponent.
Yeah, I really can't remember the last time we played them at home, Millville. And I remember when I was back in high school, and even when I was coaching, way back when I was a coordinator, we played Millville almost every year in the old Cape Atlantic League and all. But yeah, it's like I said, it doesn't matter who it is at home. We like playing at home, and it's just a great atmosphere just for an opening game at home, and have somebody like Millville come in. It just adds to the excitement of Friday night, what it's going to be all about.
Mm-hmm. When you see what Millville can do schematically, I wanted to jump back to how you guys are planning for them, just from a general sense, because you've already played a team like Atlantic City, which has proven that they could be a sectional title contender this year in Group 5 in South Jersey, and maybe even go beyond that this year, improving upon the 2024 campaign. But they had a lot of speed, especially against you guys in Week 0, where you mentioned the mistakes on defense, missed tackles. All of a sudden, they're running 80 yards downfield. Does Millville? Do you have? I should say, should you have a similar approach to Millville like you would against an Atlantic City, because they have athletes kind of all over the field?
Yeah. There's a lot of speed out there. We watched the film of Atlantic City against Millville. There's speed all over the place. And I think Millville will be very hungry coming in. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a rivalry going. Mm-hmm. They're 0-2. Nobody wants to be 0-3, just like we didn't want to start the season at 0-2 last week. That was, one of our things in our back pocket. It's just going to be one of those things. I think, they present a lot of challenges. They're a quality football team. And, you're playing against a program that has a lot of athletes out there, and you've really got to, really make sure you're checking all the boxes to be as sound as you can to put the kids in a great position to be successful.
Mm. So as far as Friday night is concerned, you guys are having a lot of pregame festivities ahead of the kickoff against Millville, which, again, 6 p.m. right here on Cape Atlantic Live. We'll have that game broadcasted for you as we would for every Mainland home game. So we'll start with the teams that are going to be honored on Friday night. You said the 1980 and the 1995 championship teams are going to be honored at the Corral on Friday night. So I guess we'll just start there. What's it like to have these teams back? Of course, the 95 team, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's their 30th anniversary. And then for the 1980 team, it's already their 45th anniversary of winning those titles back in their day. What can you say about those Mainland football teams?
They're tremendous. I was a freshman in the 1980 season, and that was Doug Strang and Calvin Robinson, a bunch of just a great football team, And I still remember they went up to Cherokee, and Cherokee was a powerhouse at the time, and pulled a big upset in the playoffs. That was when 4 teams only made it in the sectionals. And then they went and upset Overbrook for the championship, 14-12. Mm-hmm. And that team was legends, for a long time. And in fact, the next championship Mainland won was 95. There was a big gap in between that championships. And the 95 team was one of those historical teams. It was Bob Coffey's first championship that he had as a head coach. I was an assistant. I think it was like my 6th or 7th year as an assistant coach at that time. And that was a team that also, I don't think a lot was expected of them. There was a lot of talent. When you look back at that team and the amount of kids that played, 2 kids played in the NFL. I think there were 7 or 8 kids that played major college football. But they were a team that I think the game that season that turned it all around was we played Ocean City, and they're ranked 3rd in the state at the time. And we pulled a big upset over there in Ocean City. Nobody expected us to have a chance in that game. And I think that kind of got everybody believing, especially the team, that we could do something. And we went on a big roll. And, I think our only loss was EHT on Thanksgiving. And, we upset Brick Township, and they had the legend Warren Wolf come down. And everybody didn't think we were going to win the first game of that because of Warren Wolf. And we wound up winning that one in a tight game. We had to play Ocean City again in the semifinal. And we pulled another upset over there against Ocean City. And then we went and played Woodrow Wilson, and they were the number 1 team in South Jersey at the time. And we wound up beating them 42-14 for the Group 3 championship. But I think the thing that's really cool is the 95 team, every 5 years when we do a celebration, they have a big reunion in Charlie's. Yeah. And a lot of the guys come back, and they're all over the country now with their own families. The 1980 team, I see a lot of those guys. We have a tremendous alumni network at Mainland. Right. It's like close to 400 some guys in it that we send out weekly emails to, and we have events and like our golf outing in the summertime. And a lot of those guys come back and play. And so it's nice to see all those guys. And a lot of them are in the Athletic Hall of Fame and the Ring of Honor that we've started last year. So it's neat that they're all coming back, and they'll be honored before the game. We'll have them walk out as honorary captains, and our PA announcer will say some things about the seasons that they had. And it's a great night because they get together again as friends.
Yeah.
Reminisce about old stories, have the seating down in Summers Point end zone, And then, then they all hang out after the game and everybody's down Charlie's having a good time.
It's funny you mentioned before we get into the Charlie's aspect. It's funny you mentioned how the 80 team and the 95 team you have a pretty distinct connection to. As you mentioned, your freshman year in 1980 and 95, you were an assistant coach under Coach Coffey. When you, I guess, look back on those teams, I know you're the head coach now, and you've seen your own share of success in terms of state titles and sectional titles. When you look back at those teams, though, when you weren't the head coach, you were a player and obviously an assistant coach. Is it kind of cool when you is it almost, I don't know if it's cool or weird, because you're still coaching, and then all these guys are coming back together for the first time in maybe 5 years at this point. Maybe they haven't seen each other in 5 years, and then they all of a sudden you're still there, and it's like you're the one kind of bringing it all back together as the quote unquote figurehead of the program. Have you thought about anything like that when you're?
When I took over the job at Mainland as the head coach, I really wanted to try to tie the past back in. We'd never done it, and tell you the truth, it's all because of Millville. Because every time we would play Millville, they were honoring somebody, it seemed. Every time we played out there, somebody else was coming out to be honored. And I thought, man, that's pretty cool, And when I got the job at Mainland, I wanted to create an alumni network, and we slowly developed that. And it's grown, it's mushroom clouded. And we see a lot of these guys now. It's awesome. The guys from the 80 team have stopped in every so often, for a game here or there. They come back to visit family if they're not living in the area anymore. But it is a neat thing, because I look back at like the 95 team. I was a young guy on staff. I was like the big brother to a lot of the kids. I grew up with some of their siblings, and stuff like that. And now I'm like the head coach, and I often laugh at looking at some of my assistant coaches and their relationships with the kids, because it's different. It's like you look at the family hierarchy. It's like you're the dad now. Before I was the cool uncle. It's just funny how it all changes over time. But it's each team had its own little mark, and I'm just so happy that we can bring these guys back every year to celebrate and just to reminisce and still have that friendship. A lot of those guys don't see each other all the time. It's neat that it's like they instantly go back to that time period, and they're that age again. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really cool feeling for sure. So as far as the Charlie's connection is concerned, before going there post-game, obviously the field is now going to be not renamed but added. So it's now the Mustang Corral at Jack Thomas Memorial Field. You guys announced that today. So a nice honor for Mr. Jack Thomas. Tell us a little bit about that coming up on Friday night. Yeah,
Charlie's is big thing in our community, obviously, not just Summers Point, but the Mainland community. And I can't even tell you all the things they've done for our school over the years, not just little things, big, huge things. And, back in 95, everybody was starting to go to lights, and Mainland really didn't have the money to put lights in. Mm-hmm. And everybody always thought Mainland's this rich school all the time, but, it's contrary to that belief. And Jack stepped forward, and he donated the funds. I think it was $75,000 at the time.
Wow.
And paid for the lights. And, and it didn't just stop there. It was always thing with him. And, I remember when I got the head job and we went to renovate the weight room, and I was going around to the local businesses just trying to peddle up a few bucks. And I went to Charlie's, and, I think I was asking for like $2,000, and Jack's like, well, I'll give you $5,000, and he was always a guy, like every year he was like, what do you need? Just tell me what you need. Is there anything I can do for you? That's how he was. It wasn't like, he didn't always wait, and believe me, I'm sure they get their door knocked on all the time.
Yeah.
But he wasn't always a guy that like waited for that. He was more proactive. And if he could help you, he was going to help you. Mm-hmm. And now it's the tradition. Jack passed away, a few years ago, and his sons have now continued that tradition. And they're Mainland graduates and all that stuff. And Jack was a Mainland graduate, and whenever teams win championships, they're the first people to invite them there for wings and soda and stuff like that, so it's been a Mainland backbone for us all the time. And it's just one of those things that being the 30th year of the lights anniversary also, it was something we thought that was appropriate now, to kind of bring that legacy of somebody in our community. It's been nonstop with helping Mainland Regional High School, all the athletic events and other endeavors over the years. And it's apropos to just rename the field, or name the field, Jack Thomas Memorial Field, and there's a beautiful sign that will be unveiled on Friday night in the end zone where the old scoreboard was, right next to the new video scoreboard. and it really stands out, and it's very classy, and it's just a nice way to say thank you to a man who did a lot for our community and his family. It continues to do that.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. Can't wait to see it unveiled on Friday night before kickoff. And then last thing on the community end of things for Friday night, you guys are doing your youth night, so I'll give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about that. I know we've talked about it in the past, with Summers Point, Linwood, and Northfield all kind of coming together, and it's amazing that for regional high school, 3 separate towns, whether there's they're not huge towns, but they're big enough / small enough towns, but they all come together and they're all under one banner when they come to Mainland Regional High School. So what's it like to have those 3 youth programs out there on Friday night, ahead of the high school game?
That's awesome, man. The atmosphere before the game is tremendous for the kids. And it's kind of like all of a sudden our players become like NFL guys for that night, because the kids are all cheering for them. They look up to them, and there's kids, I just know from these kids all coming in over the years, they want, hey, can I wear number whatever, because that was a certain Mainland player's number that they looked up to. And just hearing the kids yelling and screaming the kids' names while they're warming up in warm-ups. And, we're fortunate, it's kind of like people always say, how do you manage 3 youth programs? And, you got 3, sometimes you got 3 starting quarterbacks coming in. One's going to be the guy,
Yeah.
A lot of other towns might have 1 program. Maybe they have 2. We're fortunate because each of the towns, and, Summers Point kind of took a year off this year, and the kids are playing in different places after having a program for 50-plus years.
Mm-hmm.
But both programs, have been, Linwood and Northfield have been championship-type programs the last several years. Northfield's always in the mix for the championships in unweighted league. Linwood was on death's doorstep several years ago, and that program resurrected itself, and they have great numbers now also. And I'm hoping Summers Point comes back around. And is able to get that program started again. I think it's going to be more of a grassroots effort down there and start from the bottom up and slowly build it again. But it's really a lot of fun, and that's one of the joys for me as a head coach of the high school is to go out and see these kids play and getting to know their families and the kids and so forth. And it's really neat because, our community is a small community, even though we got the 3 towns and 3 different youth programs going on here. But it's really neat when you go down to the ballpark and you see all of our players there and then those kids coming in and stuff. And it just makes what Mainland is, it's just one community, one school, it's in one family. And that's truly what Mainland is.
A giant community event coming up on Friday night. Mainland hosting Millville, week 2. Again, 3rd game of the year, but week 2 high school football. But we roll on here in 2025. So Mainland, Millville, 6 p.m. on Cape Atlantic Live. You can catch that game right here on this channel. Ahead of kickoff for the Mainland home opener, and of course, all future Mainland home games for the rest of the season. Coach, good luck on Friday. Looking forward to it. Renewing the rivalry with the Millville Thunderbolts. It's going to be a great event, honoring teams of the past and obviously seeing the kids of the future cheer on the team of the present as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you and Matt on Friday night.
Absolutely. The Chuck Smith Show right here, presented by Ulmer's Appliance Service. We'll see you next time.